Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cables to Clouds podcast. I'm your host this week, Tim, and with me always is my younger, more attractive version, Chris Miles at BGP Main on Blue Sky. And of course, I am Carpe-DMVPN on Blue Sky. And with us, we have a very special guest who we haven't had on the podcast before, but we're fixing that now. Scott Robohn. Robohn, I said that right? I forgot to ask.
Robohn. It's like putting a robe on.
Yeah,
right.
Robohn. Okay, cool. Yeah. Do you have a Blue Sky, Scott? I didn't actually.
I'm Scott Robohn. One word on Blue Sky.
Okay, yeah. I thought so, but I didn't want to get my wires crossed and was thinking about somebody else. Okay, cool. So let me go ahead and introduce the topic real quick, and then we'll let Scott introduce himself. So tonight we're going to be talking about kind of, with the economy being what it is, we're going to be talking about freelancing and also owning your own business and like kind of going into professional consulting kind of as a business. And we'll kind of ask all sorts of questions and see, I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions about what that looks like. So Scott, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, really appreciate you gentlemen having me on. I'm Scott Robohn. I'm the founder of Tech Salescraft. That's my consulting company. But it lets me do lots of other things besides consulting. I'm a co-founder of Network Automation Forum. I have a podcast on Packet Pushers called Total Network Operations. That's actually turning into a line of consulting business that I do. I've been an internet plumber for 35-ish years. Just had a career that's grown up with the commercial internet, and just feel super fortunate. I've been fascinated with it from day one, right out of school. So.
Yeah, that's cool. So I actually had what I would consider probably a really late start into network engineering. Actually, I bounced around. My career, I started when I was 20 and I bounced around in various things in IT. And then I actually fell into network engineering when I was 28, almost 29. So I definitely, it was definitely a late entry.
You were a late bloomer.
For me. Yeah, I was a late bloomer. I forget.
Well, let me throw this at you. So I learned ATM before I learned IP. I learned secure telephony before I learned ATM. And one of my first projects at a carrier was looking at single point of failure issues in different facilities over 12 T1 MLPPP bundles on Bay Networks routers.
Wow.
So,
nice.
That's I know no one who's listening understands what any of that means anymore. So
we actually
happy to explain. Yeah.
We actually have a pretty diverse listening group, and actually we haven't put out. I was going to remember we didn't last year. We put out the
listener survey.
Yeah, the survey, and we asked people like, "Hey, where you are in your career and everything." We had a surprising number of people who've been in the industry for about as long or almost as long. So
we should add a question on there that says, "What's your trigger word?" And depending on how far back that word goes,
what technology will you never want to work again?
Yeah, there you go.
X.25.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So obviously we brought Scott on because he's been doing this a long time, and so I wanted to ask, when you first started getting out of corporate life, if you will, or actually I didn't ask how long you were kind of doing the corporate life before you decided to get into freelancing and consulting.
So I've been out on my own just over 2 years now. It's January 2023. Took a long ramp leading up to that. I probably spent the year before pulling the trigger really thinking it through, very much over communicating things with my wife and my one last adult daughter who's still at home with us. And, I've wanted to do this forever. I really early on in my career, it's like, I'd like to build something. Not necessarily a product, but, something that I'm responsible for. And I came close a couple times and just got cold feet. And I have size 15 feet, so that's a lot of cold. But, look, I can't say it was anything that pushed me out. I had a great career, on the operations side, with Bell Atlantic as a Cisco trainer and then a Juniper trainer. Long time at Juniper that got me into being an SE and an SE leader. had some time at Cisco and Nokia, and even a disaggregated provider, DriveNets, if you've ever heard of them. But that really just finally all came to fruition. And I the last step for me was sitting down with my financial advisor and saying, "Look, I think I'm ready to pull the trigger here and just really kind of go with very little safety net." Um, and that talking through, the financial situation was the thing that made me, gave me the confidence to, you know, just start doing it with a plan. But you need a plan from which to deviate. So we can talk about that at some point.
So it sounds like you did you did what probably everybody should do, which is try to figure out basically, can I afford to
Right.
not have a 9 to 5 so that I can and do this on my own. And I swear, like that's for me, there's like a few things big red flags that keep me from trying to think about like, hey, could I do this? And that's one of them. Just trying to figure out like, do I have enough in the bank? What is enough in the bank? Like, how much do I have to have if this thing doesn't immediately take off? How many
Right.
months do I need? Like, is that? I mean, I assume that's the kind of math you were trying to figure out with the advisor, right?
Absolutely. And the calculus came down to, okay, what if you're horrible? How long can you last if you're horrible? And number one, that was not the plan. Number two, okay, worst case, I probably had 3 years of runway. And who wants to deplete their resources, right? So I
Oh
want to get
yeah,
out
right.
there and do it anyway. But I also want to emphasize, relationships for important people in your life, like with my wife. Um, I think it was just as important to have those conversations about this is what I'm thinking. Let's look at the budget and let's get lean, and let's do this together. So it wasn't, one person, me, saying this is how it's going to work. Let's work on it together. And I mean, that wasn't just a tactic, that was really important anyway, but making sure we were having that open communication about this and having buy-in together, that's all sorts of goodness, right? You don't want to fight uphill on that with your significant other in any way. So,
Especially if things don't take off, and then
right,
they're being very nervous about things. No, you're 100%, and you can't
yeah,
if there is a significant other, if there's some other stakeholder in
right.
it, like they have to be involved. If for no other reason, then like you said, you need to get lean.
You
Like
have to, you have to
hey,
have a
we got to hit.
plan for if you
Yep,
fail, right?
yep,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
And going back to corporate employment was, that's obviously, part of the backup plan
Yep.
at that initial point, right? Now that it's not a guarantee, and everybody, who's been in our business knows that if you get impacted by a layoff or you choose to leave someplace without a next place to land, it doesn't mean you're going to find your next employer in just a couple months. Sometimes
Right.
it takes a lot longer,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
So,
and lately it's holy
yeah,
crap, man.
Could be
That's
longer.
this industry's on fire, man. I don't know. Like it's been so. I think might be the worst I've ever seen it since I've been in the. Maybe I wasn't in tech in 2000, but I know right around then was like really bad too because of the dot-com bubble bursting.
it was
But
it was a tough time, and like I was at Juniper at that time, and I remember, the day in the office when the first layoffs they ever had were announced. Um, After that, like first 5 years of incredible growth, to just kind of have to scale back that enthusiasm, that was tough for folks. But I think that leads into, not just confidence in your bank account, right? What you have to fall back on, but confidence in your skills, right?
yeah,
Do you, are you really going to be able, do you really think you can go out and peddle yourself and whatever ideas you have, and get somebody to pay you for it? And, when you reach the level of insanity where the answer to that question becomes yes, you're ready at that point. And I'd say that's something I really wrestled with over time too. That's probably why I came close and backed out. And just to give a tip of the hat to a really good friend of mine, his name's James Dirksen. I will I will tell him about this episode. He may or may not listen to it, but he started his own independent work probably a decade before I ever did. And he always was a gentle encourager. Basically said, you can do this. Not pushing me, not trying to get me to do anything I didn't want to do, but I give him a lot of credit because leading by example kind of said, yeah, if James can do it, I can do it. Sorry, just kidding for any audio only listeners. So
Yeah, the for me, like I have such terrible imposter syndrome. Like it's hard for me to think like that people would actually that I could go do work for someone and they would pay me some, the amount of money that you would need to
right.
make this thing work, right? And
Right.
so I definitely have struggled with that idea. So that's definitely been something has kept me from taking that leap. And I don't know, I don't know if there's any specific what's advice that anyone can give another person about how to get over that. But yeah, I think it's a big roadblock for a lot of people.
I think there are a couple, part of it's becoming comfortable in your own skin. And, look, I do the math, right? If I've got 35 years of experience, you can probably figure out how old I am ish. And I would consider myself a late bloomer, to really get to the point of self-confidence that um, I could try this. I think one of the other confidence things that was an aha moment for me was everything what you bring to the table, what combination of technical skills, people skills, it's not for everybody. It's probably not even for most people, but it's for somebody, right? And like podcasts, I think are really interesting in microcosm of that, right? I'm not sure if 1.2 million people are listening to Cables to Clouds. They probably are, and that's awesome. Um, but the medium lets you find your audience, right? Um,
Yeah.
it's not exactly the same with doing consulting work, but there's an analogy there, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
What's
I'm
branding?
curious. I'm curious. Yeah, like you said, Tim. It's branding, right? It's personal branding, and you have to. I think we've sung the praises of having a personal brand on this pod before, and probably will continue to do so because we think it's very valuable. But I'm curious, Scott, from your perspective. So, like, obviously, you have a ton of industry experience. So you've been you've been in the trenches, you understand, exactly what goes into, being a network engineer and how that's evolved over the last 20 years.
Right.
But I'm curious, like when you moved into wanting to run your own company and do your own consulting, like how did you identify what your niche was? Like what would potentially like set you apart from other consultants or did you go through that process?
Not as thoroughly as one might think. um, and this is where I'll throw you need a plan from which to deviate out. So my path was, having been on the pre-sales technical side for the 15 years previous to making this leap, I thought, okay, a really interesting gig would be helping folks with technical go-to-market, like helping create marketing materials that are actually true and accurate. And I got to find some of that work early on through my friend James through a DARPA program actually called the Embedded Entrepreneur Initiative. And DARPA works with all sorts of tech companies that create piles of tech that are not ready for
Right.
prime time. They're not productized. They might be able to become products. They might be better off ending up as a feature on somebody's cloud platform.
Mm,
But the people who are good at the basic tech creation aren't the same people who understand, well, this is what a use case would look like for this as a product,
For
and here's
real.
how I would demo it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really actually a cool confluence of, people who understand go-to-market and product management and people doing really interesting basic tech. So that's kind of what I had right out of the gate for me. And from to make it relevant to your particular topic or your podcast in general, like my heritage is not as a cloud person. Like I've chipped away. I did the AWS baby cert. Um, I've tried to piece things together as I've gone, and I got thrown right into this project that was basically an IAM modeling tool. And one of these companies creating basic tech had a graph-based technology for looking at problems and gaps in IAM permissions.
Oh, wow.
And this is totally an old dog, new tricks. I had no idea I could do this.
Mhm.
Again, with a little baby AWS knowledge. And there was a day, like, um, the people I was working with wanted an initial demo of the product, like, a scripted, here's the use case we're trying to go after, and so forth. And I was being a perfectionist, and I said, just let me do it a couple more times before I bring it, out in the open. And I kind of got tricked into doing it live with the customer, on a call, that afternoon. And it was the right thing to do, like just ripping off the Band-Aid. But it's a confidence builder, right? You go, you find one of those initial projects, maybe even a technology area you're not completely comfortable with, and you get somebody pushing you out the door. And that was a huge boost for me.
I was going to say, good thing you were in SE at one point. You get asked to do a lot of demos that you weren't expecting to do. So that's, I'm sure that was a common feeling for you.
Right. You got that right.
What's interesting, a couple things, right? For one is it's interesting that was your introduction to kind of consulting, because I mean, what you basically described is like technical marketing, like you're
right.
TME, like I'm a TME, right? So technical marketing engineering, that's it. So that makes a lot of sense. And what I've also found about technology, I know there's new technology and we're on a treadmill that we'll probably never ever be able to get off of. But when you get a certain amount of experience, and this is something that I hope the people who are earlier in career will listen to and find hope in, is that when you get a certain amount of experience or a certain amount of exposure to the tech that's out there, what you'll find is that 90% of every new technology is just 3 old technologies in a trench coat,
Exactly.
At the end of the day.
Yep. The raccoons, with the baby head on the upmost raccoon. Yep.
Yeah, it's the case, and especially in networking, where that's always been the case. Every new technology, like DMVPN, is just frame relay with a new face, right? Like like take any old technology and dress it up with lipstick, and now it's a new technology. So
there's hub and spoke behind there somewhere. That's right.
So it's not turtles all the way down, but if you know what a turtle looks like, you should be able to muddle through eventually.
Right.
So the other thing that keeps me from thinking about like starting my own consulting business is so before my grandfather passed, he was a very staunch like business guy. Like he didn't believe that anyone should work for anyone else. He was like 100% the American dream, like build your business type of guy. And he was always trying to get me to build my own networking, like consulting business. And I would tell him over and over again, I love network consulting. I'm very good at it. It's a completely different skill set to run a business, to do the P&L, to do all of the SOW, to like just all the administrative bullshit associated with running a business. So, talk a little bit about that. How did you just like both feet into the pool at the same time to make that work, or how did you navigate that?
It did. I kind of just bit the bullet, and I mean, full disclosure, the back end business stuff is not my favorite part of it, and I think that's true for just about every technologist that does this sort of thing.
Right.
But I knew it was a must have. One thing that's pretty awesome about, the current environment and probably the last 5+ years is, there's fractional everything out there, right? And you can get somebody to help keep your books, and you can get somebody to make sure that your invoices are getting paid.
Yeah, as a service.
That's right. And I year and a half ago started working with a virtual assistant who lives 40 minutes from me, and I've never met her in person. But her name is Emily, and Emily, if you listen to this, you rock. She helps reduce entropy in my business life, and like having those support functions to minimize the amount of back end stuff that you don't want to do that aren't the best use of your time. Like that's it's much more easily obtainable today, I think, than probably even 5+ years ago.
It's a really good answer, actually. I hadn't even considered that part of it because well, I'm just no good at it either. Like for example, if it were coming to like, I have to write a statement of work for a customer, I think I could write the statement of actual work just fine, but God knows I wouldn't have any fucking clue. I wouldn't have any clue on like, what do I charge for this service? Or, like, how do I figure out profit and loss? How do I figure out what, that I'm not eating my hat by doing this work, right?
Right. Yeah, sizing projects is probably more art than science, and I'm still not really good at it. But again, I've got good resources to go to. Um, and part of the feedback loop is uh, doing a project that you do, eat your hat on, right? Because you didn't bid enough hours and it took you twice as what you budgeted. Or pricing something too high and not winning the job
Right.
because of that. But hopefully, as a sentient human being, you're able to take feedback and incorporate it into your future. And you have to take that attitude. You're not going to get it right all the time, even though you're going to try to.
So I'm curious, how much of the business side of the aspect did you know before going into this? Like, is this stuff that you just kind of learned being in the industry, or did you actually do any kind of formal training or education on this stuff, or did you kind of like take what you know and then kind of added in the pieces you didn't have using fractional people as those services? How did that come to be?
So no formal training at all, but two really good sources of here's people you can go to if you have questions. One of them is the guy James that I keep over quoting here. Always good for a question on how do I do this. Also, my financial advisor plugged me in with other local business people that like were really supportive, and other good places for me to, hey, do you know somebody who knows about this or can help with this from a business perspective? um, we've got a couple of those remote workplaces in my town as well, and they actually use that as a feature to sell you to come in and use
Oh,
space
like the
in their
WeWork type
facility.
setup.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah,
I've
but
seen
my
them do
town
it.
is
I've
too
seen them do it.
small. Yeah. We don't qualify for WeWork, but and like I visited the newest one a couple weeks ago, and um, almost, said, let me try it for a couple months just for that aspect of rubbing elbows with other entrepreneurs, other folks in the local
Networking,
community.
right? Yeah.
That's right. Yep. But here's another big thing that kind of hit me early on in the gig. Um, I I'm a team player, right? Always been part of teams, and I'm wired that way. I like it. Um, on day two, literally, it was the Tuesday after the Monday that I officially started on my own. I had this realization that I'm not part of a team anymore.
Right.
And there was a temporary, my stomach dropped out from beneath me. Um, but um, I came back to my senses pretty quickly and just had the thought that I'm just gonna have to find other ways to be part of a team. And that's led me to do other things like co-found Network Automation Forum. And even though that's not an employer or the same kind of organization, it's certainly scratched an itch there where I do have a community that I'm part of that's pretty awesome to see how they come together and help each other on automation issues and other issues too. And like, so there are other ways to build a team and feel part of a team, even if you're not in a corporate context anymore.
That's really good.
Yeah, just a bit of feedback there. I will say that's it. It must be working because the reviews I've gotten about Network Automation Forum have been astounding. To be honest with you, some people have said it's the best kind of networking based conference they've been to, etc. So I think you're doing a great job there. And I also want to kind of touch on that point you made about getting involved in these kind of like entrepreneurial hubs and things like that.
Sure.
When I briefly lived in Tulsa, Same thing. They had this thing called 36 Degrees North. I think it's changed names now. I can't remember. But like I was part of this program where all these remote workers were moved to Tulsa, and they would all go to this entrepreneurial hub, like co-working space. And I have seen people just like thrive there, like starting businesses, doing those things. So like, yeah, if you can find one of those communities, I can definitely see how you can just like build the groundswell and then just like launch. Like it really works.
I see the benefit in those. I haven't tapped into that per se, but another group I want to tip hat to is USNUA and the
Yeah.
local networking user group.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
we'll pay homage to Jason Gintert, who was supposed to be with us tonight, wasn't available. Jason, we hope you got your issues taken care of tonight. But getting involved with co-founding the Virginia Nug, right? I'm here in Northern Virginia much of the time, and that's been another way to like connect with folks with same technical interests in a different way than NAF, but a very complementary way. That very hyper local. And I probably spent 2024 going to maybe 10 or 11 different NUG meetings all over the place. So,
Yeah.
but those community connections are really important. You may not think they are, but they are. So.
Oh no, I mean, especially when especially in a time like now where like people are getting laid off left and right and center,
Yep.
and the industry's on fire. Like, I've heard so many horror stories of people who are like, oh, I've been out of job for over a year and I've sent 5,000 I've sent 5,000 applications in and I've applied on these websites. And at the end of the day, it's really your network that's going to be there for you, like probably when in that moment. And that you need to be, in the same method, you need to be there for other people as much as possible to help connect. Because I think getting
Absolutely.
a job or whatever, like in that situation, it's hard. Like it's a black hole, and you're competing with
Yeah.
so many other people, and leveraging your network is such a huge boon. So yeah, making those connections and not insincerely, right? Not making
Right.
connections and just seeing what you can get out of them, but like truly making connections and actually being part of a community and networking with people. Yeah, man, I don't think there's a substitute for it, really.
It really isn't. And I think there was a huge lesson learned for me on that front where I think before doing this, um, my ideas and thoughts around community were restricted to religious groups and the neighborhood that you lived in. And I've kind of seen the power of community in other contexts. And so that really kind of expanded my view there pretty clearly. It's been great to figure that out.
So actually, this is a interesting question then. So a thing I wanted to ask that you just reminded me of as a tangent to this, what about, or I don't know if this has happened to you or not. Have you ever had to take on a job or a consulting gig or whatever, or get asked to do something that you yourself either don't have the skill set for, don't have the time for? Like, have you done subcontracting as part of your business? Have you brought in other people to perform any kind of? Some people do and some people don't, right?
Yeah.
And it's a different. People run their businesses differently. So I was just curious, has that been a thing that you had to concern yourself with?
So I'm actually in the middle of a project where we're bringing somebody on as a contractor because he has the right skill set and because I don't have the time to do it.
Right.
And it's using your network, right? And figuring out, okay, who's doing what and who needs what. And I'll say on this point, another huge lesson learned was how important your LinkedIn network is.
Oh yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
LinkedIn is just a manifestation of the people that you actually know. But it's a very practical manifestation of it. And I had no clue how useful that was going to be to me. Just, seeing things to ask questions about, and leading to opportunities in ways that I just had not ever expected.
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn itself is just an artifact. It's a social media site that's focused on
Right.
business. But
Yep.
yeah, that essentially that gathering space for people in your network where you can know that you will
Yeah.
find them, basically, is what I think what we're talking about here, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah. So totally agree with that.
And I think you've partially answered this in some capacity, but I'm curious now that you are kind of outside of having a big company behind you, so to say. I say that until it grows into this conglomerate, right? Which will happen one day.
Robocorp.
Yeah. But like, how do you stay current with like technology and things like that? Like obviously, if you have NAF and you have USNUA, then you're tapped into the community. But is there a certain way that you're making sure that your skill set is up to date, not only from a technical perspective, but also just a market perspective, right? You got to know what's out there and what services people are going to pay for, right? So how are you staying current in that capacity?
So my number one mechanism for that is podcasts. And I like to walk and run for exercise. Maybe calling it running is a little generous for me at my stage in life,
Been there.
but like that's we had this offline conversation about video versus audio only, right? And I just load up on podcasts, and I have ones that I intentionally stretch me. Um, what's the AI developer one? Latent Space.
I've
Um,
heard of it. I haven't listened to it, but I'm
it's
aware
Yeah, I
of it.
haven't been
Yeah.
listening, but that does sound. I've seen it. I know what you're.
and I don't understand half the things they're talking about. But it's exposure, and it's like, okay, I need to go learn about that. I need to go learn about that. Um, and amongst our community of, you know, trad networking and cloud networking and adjacent tech, I've always got something coming at me, and it's probably because I'm also always trying to battle tinnitus. But let's just say this is a happy side effect of usually listening to something when I'm not supposed to be paying attention to somebody else, like my wife. So I
That's
also pay
that's
for YouTube Premium, specifically so
Oh
it will
man.
keep playing even when the screen locks. Right. So
Oh,
same
that's what
approach
the.
there.
Oh my God, I was.
YouTube Premium. Look, I hate them for doing it, but it's one of the best investments. They got us all locked in on YouTube for years and years, and then added
Correct.
it. Like I will never. That's the one thing that's worth the money for
I
sure.
didn't even realize this was a thing that YouTube Premium did because.
Yeah.
So I've been learning Japanese for years now for almost 3 years now,
I've
and
watched a little bit of your
oh,
your uh,
thanks.
your your progress reports on that. Yep.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. But what I was going to say is today, for example, I really wanted to load up some. They do a lot of. There's a lot of Japanese language podcasts on YouTube,
Hmm. Okay.
and that are not necessarily like on podcast catchers because they're Japanese or
YouTube
whatever.
channel.
I just haven't done the
Right.
work to. But I usually listen to them on YouTube while I'm doing other things, and I wanted to go on a walk today, and I did that. I hit the YouTube button and then I put the phone in my pocket and I was like, ah, shit, because it stopped playing, of course. And I
Right.
was like, man, I wish I could get this thing to keep playing. I didn't even know that was like a thing. I didn't realize
Yep.
YouTube
Yeah,
Premium
man.
would do that. So
Yep.
now I'm like, oh shit, I got to go pay for YouTube Premium
Yeah.
just so I have this
So
functionality.
YouTube, if you hear that, you owe me and Scott some commission on that sale. Thank
Yeah.
you
I
very
was gonna.
much.
Well, I'll split it with you, Chris.
Yeah,
I'll split
thanks,
it with
man.
you.
That's
It'll
fair.
it'll be like $3.
Exactly. One-time payment.
Yeah.
See, you learned something. Everybody learned something on this podcast.
Yeah.
Let me. I don't want to cut off your questions, but let me just throw out one
No,
other big
please.
idea that's
Mm.
really, why do this, right? And how do you adjust your plans? And I think when you stumble on something or something brews for long enough that it's something you get really interested in and you feel like you have things to say about it,
Yeah.
that's a driver, right? And for some people that's a product idea. For some people it's basically a consulting engagement model. And that's what led me to start the Total Network Operations podcast on Packet Pushers and kind of talk to organizations about, you have a modern network. Do you really think you should stay organizationally aligned to the old way? And are you thinking about the new tools and tech from an ops perspective? Um, and you know, ops teams, you really need to participate in your own rescue. How do you
Yeah.
elevate? And I won't go into a pitch on that here, but kind of developing those ideas and turning it into something where I'm having multiple constructive consulting engagements with enterprises. That's pretty awesome to say, this is something that it's my
Yeah.
idea. and I'm not bragging, like, because no idea is purely yours, right? You have all sorts of
Yeah, I
influences
mean,
and you develop
everybody
some things.
forms their opinions
That's
based
right.
on the things they learn, the things they do.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great though, because you've got this point that you basically to make and on the podcast, which is true, by the way. I've talked to many ops teams who are some varying flavor of essentially consumers of whatever tooling management buys for them,
That's
which
right. Yep.
sucks, which is
Yep.
terrible. Instead of,
Yep.
it should be the opposite way. The ops people should be saying, here's maybe not saying here's the tool we need, but certainly here's the data we need. Now, how do we find these tools? But anyway, but that leads to opportunities for you to then, because people are hearing that and being like, yeah, we agree
Right.
with you. And then it becoming a business opportunity. I think that's really powerful, because I was going to ask basically my next question, and I don't mean it to be like a Q&A, but I just have so many questions about this,
This is
about
awesome.
how to
No,
be
it's good. This
successful
is
with
going
this.
fine. Yeah, yeah.
How do you find customers? Like, you know what I mean? Like you
Right.
launch your business on Tuesday, Wednesday, where's the pipeline? Like, that's the part
Right.
that's another thing. I'm like, man, how do I find customers?
So on the one hand, you'll find your initial customers through your network and your contacts, right? I mean, that's fairly organic and natural. Unless you're super charismatic and you have the pill to ail all ills or to cure all ills, you're gonna need to do marketing at some point. And that's another huge lesson learned here. Um, LinkedIn plays a role there. Other tools play a role. Um, one of the I interact with lots of marketers and marketing leaders now in my multiple roles, and I never set out to learn more about marketing, but I have. It's actually a lot more interesting than I ever expected, and it's also changing, right? Because of what AI is doing for search and kind of breaking everything with SEO, like everybody else is having to figure it out all
Yeah, that's a
again.
great point.
And like I get to figure it out too, right along with them. So
Yeah, the SEO thing is so interesting, and the what is it? The OpenAI as search engine bit,
yep,
like, yeah, that's going to change. Basically, SEO won't be a thing. Like, if that's
breaks it, totally breaks it. Yep. Yep.
so, yeah. Yeah, I was listening to an audiobook because I couldn't listen to the YouTube thing I wanted to listen to. I was listening to an audiobook on my walk instead, and it was one of those business books or whatever. And the guy was saying that like email is still king, like from a marketing perspective, like not social media, not like email can drive you, websites and email, but like that
Sure.
email is still apparently the number one way to reach people. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know how old this book is, but
Hey, there's probably something to it. I do know that the noise threshold has risen horribly, and
Yeah.
I have some increased sympathy for marketers who will say things just to get attention. Um, I don't like it. I'm never going to recommend that approach, especially for a
yeah,
technical audience.
that's
You
it.
know, our BS detectors go off pretty
Yep.
quickly.
Yep.
Um, but the good ones are the ones who don't do that and still find a way through the noise. And that's, again, it's a changing environment. I sound like I'm an expert on this. I'm way over my skis right now. Um, but it is fascinating. And like, I'm learning a ton in this area that I didn't expect to.
Well, what is an expert except someone who's being successful at the thing they're doing, right? So, I mean, as long as you're being successful, I think that fits.
I'm writing
Yeah,
that down. I'm going to remember that. Tim said.
yes, yes, yes. Put the quote on your next newsletter or whatever.
That's right.
So, people will read it and be like, "Who?" But anyway,
Right. Tim,
uh,
Tim. Oh, no, it was Chris. It was Chris.
Yeah, there you
well,
go.
if you said Chris, they'd probably know who you're talking about. I don't know.
Oh,
Okay, I have to ask. I'll ask one more question, and then we have to make this like more see where it goes. Because this one, and you don't have to answer it because I feel like it's almost personal, but like I don't know how you'd possibly like the number one red flag for me starting my own business with a family. I have a wife and two daughters. Is how do you strike out on your own, like in America, with like health insurance the way it is? Like, how do you do it? You don't have to answer, but you don't have to answer
No,
about
I'll
your own.
answer.
Like,
I will. So that was probably a big blocker for me for a long time. And I mean, the short version is there is a certain amount of suck it up. You're going to have to figure out how to pay for it. Now, the Affordable Care Act really helps, right? When you're only at an income level of, a place where you can qualify for, if you
yeah,
like your doctor, you can keep it in plans. Um, But if you're successful, you're not going to qualify for that for long, right? And I'm like, 2025 is the year that I'm going to have to make a switch, right? Um, the reality is it is expensive. I only have my wife and I now. We have four adult children. So I mean that was part of my calculus too,
you
right?
did
We
the
didn't
math on
have
it. Yeah,
that's right. Um, but it is doable. Um, you have to factor it in. The financial planning has to account for that.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I think
Now, and
every.
that's for
Oh, go
and
ahead.
that's for normal. That's no for normal situations. Like I know other people have very specific medical circumstances that make
Yeah,
that a
you got to
lot
be able to
riskier.
afford to.
Yeah,
You got to
Yeah.
be at
yeah,
the end of the day, whatever your situation, you just simply have to be able to afford to not
that's right.
have like your employer pay for half of your health insurance,
Right.
whatever that looks like. And I
Yep.
don't think there's an easy answer for that. And also who knows how long the Affordable Care Act will be around, but like hopefully it stays, stays.
You could
So
move
yeah,
to a
no,
country with
that's.
socialized healthcare, but
Or you can move to a country with a socialized healthcare. I guess that would be an option as well, perhaps. Yeah, no, that for me, that's every time I think about like potentially doing it. Like, for example, I have a friend in Canada, Andrew Brown. He runs Exam Pro. He runs a training a
Okay. Sure.
platform, and he's that's his job. That's his full day. That's his full time job. He's very successful at it. It's a really cool platform. And I just like, dude, how nice, like, good for you. But like, I'm just thinking, like, I could
yeah.
not at this point in my life with two, still underage kids, and
Sure.
my wife doesn't work, and so I'm, sole proprietor, if you will, sole breadwinner. It's yeah, man, it's tough.
Yeah.
Like, not to be political, but it's so funny that there's so much said, by the party of that loves business about starting business and being successful business and the American dream. But I wonder how many people are actually blocked from from starting their own
Mm,
business because they literally just would not be able to afford to do it.
right.
Whether it's a real financial blocker or just the fear of it. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a real impact. And I definitely, how am I going to pay for healthcare? How am I going to do this? That was me when I backed out a couple times before, right? Um, again, we won't make it super political, but I think the one thing that is so messed up is that doctors and healthcare providers don't work for us.
yeah, for
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
They work for the insurance companies, and having this intermediary that is not, you can search
For
for
profit.
altruism all you want. Yeah, even not even profit motive, right? It's like you should be concentrating on me, not what bill code you can put down to maximize the, what's insurance is going to pay out.
Yep.
And that's another podcast on a different network with other beverages. So,
Right.
yeah.
And say I think
Yeah,
there's a few
yeah.
of them out there already, but
Yeah, no, and again, not to, I wasn't trying to make it political
It's
at
all
all,
good.
but
Yeah,
like, but yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of people, and I think there are a lot of people who are like, look, I got to keep a day job,
sure.
and like, this can just be my side gig until that time in my life comes where I could potentially make this happen, right, and do a full
yeah.
time, do it on your own gig. So yeah, that's I wasn't looking, I didn't think there was any kind of silver bullet there. I was just like,
Yeah.
man.
I guess the bottom line, the way I would wrap that topic up is there are ways you can do it if you just plan. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's cheap, but it can be done, and just get educated and know what your options are. In that regard, kind of build it as a side gig until you're ready to leave your full-time employer.
Hmm.
I did this absolutely the wrong way. I was too ready to actually just jump over the cliff
Okay.
without having lots of steady, or promised revenue yet. That is not, what the textbooks tell you to do. So,
Yeah, I mean, but you built a network. You and that obviously helped a lot getting you started. You had coaches who were in your corner, right?
yep,
That obviously all helps a lot.
yep.
You've called out multiple people multiple times about that. So yeah, if there's any message we could give to the people listening, from my perspective, the biggest one would be, um, if you're going to try to strike it out on your own, like make sure that you have a network that can
Yep.
help support you in that endeavor.
Yep. Yeah. Again, not a LinkedIn plug, but just n- discovering how important that really is, right? Not just for jobs and revenue and gigs, but for ideas to bounce off of. Somebody might know somebody. There's so many other pieces to that puzzle that makes your network so important.
Yeah, I guess maybe one last question from me before we kind of wrap this up. So, like, obviously, you're a few years into this. You've kind of done a lot of research into it before you went in. I guess at this point, like, what would you say? Like, twofold question. Like, what is the easiest thing to do to get started, if you're contemplating doing this? And second, like, what are the things you did wrong that you would recommend someone not do or do differently? Which is always, take it with a grain of salt, I guess.
Right.
But yeah,
Right. Right.
what would you say?
Well, I think you have to start with the things that are really going to engage you. Like, what are the things that you really like doing that you can actually get other people to pay you for? It's that intersection of, I think I have talent and skills here, or at least enough, and there's enough of a market demand for
Right.
it. I kind of business 101, but I think
Right.
some people don't think that through. Um, I To answer your what did I do wrong? Well, again, probably jumping in, maybe being a little too frustrated and being ready to go. That I'm an emotional person, right? And I probably could have kept my emotions under check a little bit there. I'm glad it worked out as positively as it did. And I don't want to imply that there's only one way to do that, right? Um, I think you can say by the numbers that having more of a plan well ahead of handing in the resignation letter reduces risk. You're never going to eliminate risk in this
Oh, for sure.
conversation. But yeah, that's definitely something I could have thought through more thoroughly, but it
Yeah.
thankfully just has worked out well.
Okay. No, I think it's really good advice. I mean, obviously, and it's not just like, oh, well, you should plan better, right? Like it's specifically like, don't be try not to be emotional in the moment. Try to really have the
Right,
plan together. Try to really, do the math. Like do all the stuff that you
right,
said you did all the way at the beginning, right? Like before you pull that trigger, make sure that your financial advisor believes that you have the runway. All things being equal, right? Nobody knows what's going to happen
right.
tomorrow, right? And a house could burn down. Who knows? Nobody knows.
Exactly.
But within reason, risk adverse, within the margin of risk, right?
It's
So I
basically
think that's really good advice.
failing to plan is planning to fail, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right. Yes.
so it's pretty
Yeah.
easy. So,
Okay.
Tim, if you want to do this, just sit your wife down, sit your kids down, and say, "Hey, for the next year, we won't get sick, we won't break any
That's right.
bones.
That's
We're
right.
never
Nobody's
gonna go
leaving
to-"
the house because I can't. I
Yeah.
can't have anybody trip on the stairs and break their
Yeah.
leg. So
Here's how that conversation really should go, Chris. Hey, honey, here's what I'm thinking. And I think I really love to do this. And here are things that I think need to happen. What do you think? Right? I mean,
Mm.
it's a real, and I know you were just being silly. Sorry. I,
No,
I
no.
don't want to sound
no,
I
preachy.
think
that's
this is
fair.
good.
No, that's
This
a
is
good
good.
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. So,
Let
I
me
yeah.
let me let me let me give you like one.
Please.
If I were to end with an anecdote on how's that worked out, um, So like I felt like I had really good partnership and buy-in from my wife.
Mm.
Um, Stephanie, thank you. I love you. She's going to listen to this, I bet. Um, and at my year anniversary, like I'm really good at memorializing dates. I remember dates, um, and I totally missed the 1 year anniversary of me starting my own business. And I realized it a couple weeks after the date, and it's just a
Uh,
function of how busy I was, which is a really good
that's
problem.
the good problem to have.
Yeah. And so I said, hey, honey, I'm a year into this, just passed. I know what I think about how is it going. What do you think? And she paused very thoughtfully, and she said, I think you're thriving. I've seen you work this hard before, but always accompanied with all the stress.
Right.
And now I see you working this hard and I don't see the stress.
That's
And like,
important.
that was super gratifying, to hear it from outside my own head. Right. And I didn't think of it that way. And I just didn't realize how much I was enjoying things.
Yeah,
And
if the,
that was,
if the person that knows you the best says that,
yeah.
Yeah, it's gotta
from
be
an
worth
observer
something.
view, then that's really
Yep.
good.
Yeah.
So that gives me continued hope. And I hope it gives others hope.
That's great. No, the definitely the goal here is to just let people know, hey, what to expect, and good, bad, and ugly, and that's I think that's a really good place to wrap it up. So, Scott, thanks for joining us. This has been so enlightening. I hope that a lot of people that listen to this really find it enlightening as well. Chris, any final thoughts?
No, I was gonna say, again, this has been great. I think it's a really fruitful conversation. Scott, is there anything you want to plug, where people can find you online, or
Right.
anything that you're involved in? Feel free.
Yeah, look, come visit us at Network Automation Forum. We'll be in Prague at the end of May 2025, and I'm not just talking to everybody. I mean you, Tim and Chris. You need to come and join us.
I'd love to go
We'll
to
be
Prague.
back in the U.S. in November. Location to be determined soon, I hope, and announced. And do me a favor and check out Total Network Operations. Like I'm really trying to put emphasis on helping elevate the role of ops in network organizations and across IT. Love to hear what you have to say, any feedback, and if you have interesting folks you want to recommend to come on that show, I'm all ears. And if I can follow up with any questions on anything from this pod, reach out. Get Scott Robohn on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find me. Tim and Chris, it's been awesome. I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, dude, it's been great having you. We'll get all the links to the shows and everything in the show notes and the Network Automation Forum and everything as well. I would love to go to Prague. I'll see if the wife's up for it.
Roger.
I'll let you know. But okay, so this is So this has been the Cables to Clouds podcast. If you like what you heard or saw or both, please subscribe to us. Assuming you haven't already. Actually, I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you're probably already subscribed. So never mind. Just hit the unsubscribe button and subscribe again.
Yeah,
That'll help us a lot. And with that, we'll leave you, and we'll see you next week.